The glass doors of Global Tech Tower shattered as security guards rushed through the lobby. Upstairs, CEO Robert Mitchell's hand shook as he dialed 911, while his 9-year-old daughter Emma clutched a small recording device, tears streaming down her face. The billion-dollar deal that would change everything was unraveling in real time, but nobody could have predicted it would be a child who would bring down an empire. Before we begin, our community spans all continents. If you feel comfortable, mention your city's name in the comments. If you appreciate being part of this global community, please like and follow our channel. Emma Thompson pressed her small nose against the cold glass window of her father's 50th floor office, watching San Francisco's fog roll beneath them like silent waves. At 9 years old, she had visited her father's company dozens of times, but today felt different. Global Tech Enterprises was buzzing with an energy she'd never felt before. "Daddy, why is everyone so nervous today?" she asked, turning to watch her father adjust his crimson tie for the third time that morning. Robert Mitchell, CEO of Global Tech, glanced at his daughter with distracted affection. At 45, the lines around his eyes had deepened over the past year, his salt and pepper hair more salt than pepper these days. "It's a big day, Pumpkin. The biggest in our company's history." Emma nodded solemnly, as if she understood the weight of a billion-dollar international investment. She didn't, of course, but she understood her father's language, the tightness around his mouth, the slight tremor in his usually steady hands. "Will I get to meet the people from China and Russia?" Emma asked, her eyes brightening. Languages had always been her passion, her gift. At 9, she already spoke Spanish and French fluently and had been teaching herself Mandarin with remarkable success. Robert smiled, finally looking directly at his daughter. "Not today, Em. These meetings are very serious. Dr. Chen will handle all the translation work with Lingo Bridge." He gestured toward the sleek black device sitting on his conference table. "That's why we created it after all. Perfect translation, no human error." Emma frowned, walking over to examine the device. Lingo Bridge had been her father's pride for the past 3 years, an AI translation system that promised to revolutionize international business by providing flawless, instantaneous translation across 47 languages. "But I could help," she insisted, running her finger along the smooth edge of the translator. "Last time I caught when Mr. Tanaka's joke didn't translate right, remember? That was different, Emma," her father said firmly. "This isn't a dinner party. There are contracts worth billions of dollars being signed today." The office door opened and Sarah Mitchell entered, looking elegant in a navy business suit, her blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun. At 43, Emma's mother retained the grace and poise that had first caught Robert's attention 12 years ago at a linguistics conference. "The Shanghai contingent just landed," Sarah announced, then softened her expression when she saw Emma. "Sweetie, I thought we agreed you'd stay in the children's lounge today." Emma's shoulders slumped. "It's boring there. Can't I just watch? I'll be super quiet." Robert and Sarah exchanged looks, that silent communication that parents perfect over years. "Emma," her father began in his no-arguments voice, "this is my career, our future. I need you to—" "Please," Emma interrupted, deploying her best pleading eyes. "I just want to see Lingo Bridge in action with real international business people for my future career." Sarah's expression softened. As a linguistics professor who had contributed to Lingo Bridge's early development, she understood her daughter's fascination. "How about a compromise? You can observe the initial greetings from my office. The video feed shows everything, but you won't disturb anyone." Emma's face lit up. "Deal." Robert checked his watch and nodded reluctantly. "Fine, but only the first 15 minutes. Sarah, make sure she goes to the lounge after that." He bent down and kissed Emma's forehead. "This is important, Pumpkin. The most important day of my life. Emma nodded solemnly. I know, Daddy. I'll be good. As her parents left to greet the international delegation, Emma lingered, her curious fingers still resting on Lingo Bridge. Something about today didn't feel right, a subtle wrongness she couldn't name. She'd always had an intuition about languages, the way meaning flowed, or didn't. It was like music to her, and today she sensed a discordant note somewhere in the symphony. Emma? Her father called from the doorway. Coming? She gave the device one last curious glance before joining her father. As they walked down the hallway, Emma noticed Thomas Wilson approaching. At 55, her father's business partner had always treated her kindly, bringing language books from his international trips. There's my favorite polyglot, Thomas smiled, tousling her hair. Ready for the big day, Robert? As ready as we'll ever be, her father replied, checking his watch again. Thomas knelt to Emma's level, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. I've got a surprise for you later, a first-edition Russian dictionary I found in Moscow last month. Really? Spasibo, Emma replied in Russian, making Thomas laugh. Your pronunciation is getting better. Keep practicing, and you'll put Lingo Bridge out of business. As they continued toward Sarah's office, Emma felt a strange chill at Thomas's words. There was something in his tone when he mentioned Lingo Bridge, something that didn't match his smile. Here we are, Robert said, stopping at Sarah's door. Remember, 15 minutes, then straight to the lounge. Emma nodded, entering her mother's elegant office with its wall of monitors. Sarah pointed to the center screen, showing the conference room. You can watch from here. I need to join them now. Left alone, Emma settled into her mother's chair, eyes fixed on the screen. The international delegates were arriving, solemn-faced executives from China, Russia, and the Middle East. Her father stood at the head of the table, confidence radiating from his tall frame. Dr. Chen entered with the Lingo Bridge devices, placing them strategically around the conference table. Emma leaned forward, fascinated. Today would change everything for her father's company. Little did she know, it would change everything for her, too. Sarah's office offered a perfect view of the main conference room through a large monitor mounted on the wall. Emma sat cross-legged in her mother's leather chair, watching as elegantly dressed businessmen and women filed into the room. Her father stood at the head of the table, confidence radiating from his tall frame as he greeted each guest. That's Mr. Zhao from Shanghai Tech Investments, Sarah explained, pointing to an older gentleman with silver-rimmed glasses. And that's Ms. Petrova from the Russian Consortium. Emma studied their faces intently. Why do they look so serious? Sarah smiled. When this much money is involved, people get very serious. This deal will connect global tech systems to financial institutions across 17 countries. On screen, Dr. Marcus Chen entered, carrying the Lingo Bridge device Emma had seen in her father's office. At 50, the brilliant engineer moved with the cautious precision of someone who had spent more time with machines than people. He placed identical devices at 3 points around the conference table. Why do they need 3? Emma asked. Different language groups, Sarah explained. One for Mandarin, one for Russian, and one for the Arabic delegation. Emma watched as Dr. Chen activated the systems, speaking briefly into each one and nodding with satisfaction at the responses. Her mother squeezed her shoulder. I need to join them now. Remember our deal. 15 minutes, then it's off to the lounge. After Sarah left, Emma scooted closer to the screen, turning up the volume. The delegation members were taking their seats, earpieces in place, to receive the translated communications. Her father began his opening remarks, his voice confident and smooth. Welcome to San Francisco and to Global Tech Enterprises. Today marks the beginning of a historic partnership that will transform international finance. Emma listened as Lingobridge translated her father's words into multiple languages simultaneously. The faces of the international guests remained impassive, occasionally nodding. So far, everything seemed perfect. Then something caught her attention. As Mr. Zhao asked a question in Mandarin, Emma leaned forward, her brow furrowing. She'd been studying Mandarin for nearly a year now, and while she wasn't fluent, she recognized enough to know that something was off. Mr. Zhao had clearly asked about security protocols, but Lingobridge translated it as a question about implementation timelines. Emma frowned. Could she have misunderstood? She continued watching, her attention now laser-focused on the Mandarin exchanges. It happened again, 10 minutes later. Ms. Petrova said something in Russian about verification processes, and the translation shifted the meaning subtly. Not entirely wrong, but missing key concerns about oversight. Emma bit her lip. Maybe she was mistaken. After all, Lingobridge was her father's pride and joy, tested thousands of times for accuracy. And yet, a movement on screen caught her attention. Thomas Wilson, her father's business partner, was watching the proceedings from a corner of the room, his expression unreadable. Something about the way he studied the international delegates made Emma uncomfortable. At 55, Uncle Thomas, as she'd always called him, had been part of her life since she could remember. He'd given her a beautiful Russian dictionary for her last birthday, encouraging her language studies. The 15 minutes her mother had allowed were nearly up, but Emma couldn't tear herself away. She had to be sure about what she was hearing. She reached for her backpack and pulled out her tablet, quickly opening her language app. She typed in a phonetic approximation of what Mr. Zhao had just said, comparing it to Lingobridge's translation. Her suspicions deepened. The differences were subtle but significant, especially when the conversation turned to contract terms. The translation was changing key phrases about financial oversight, reporting requirements, and security protocols. Emma's heart began to race. This wasn't a simple error. It was too consistent, too specifically focused on certain topics. Someone had programmed Lingobridge to mistranslate deliberately. The door opened, and Emma jumped guiltily. But it wasn't her mother. It was Lily, her father's assistant. "Emma, sweetie, your mum asked me to take you to the lounge now," Lily said with a kind smile. "Lily, wait," Emma said urgently. "I think something's wrong with Lingobridge. It's changing what people are saying." Lily looked confused. "What do you mean, honey?" "The translations," Emma explained, pointing at the screen. "They're not right. When Mr. Zhao asks about security checks, Lingobridge says he's asking about timelines. It's changing important things." Lily patted her shoulder gently. "I'm sure it's just a small glitch, Emma. Your father and Dr. Chen tested Lingobridge hundreds of times. It's perfectly accurate." "But I heard it," Emma insisted. "I know some Mandarin and Russian, and the translations are wrong." "Emma," Lily said firmly, "these are very complex languages, with nuances that even advanced students might miss. Lingobridge is a sophisticated AI system. Now, your mother wants you in the lounge." Reluctantly, Emma gathered her things, her mind racing. Should she tell someone about the translation discrepancies? Would anyone believe a 9-year-old? As Lily led her from the office, Emma glanced back at the screen. Her father was smiling, unaware that the words being fed into his ear weren't exactly what his international partners were saying. And somehow Emma sensed that these weren't innocent mistakes. She needed proof, and she needed to understand why. But most importantly, she needed someone to believe her. The children's lounge at Global Tech was designed to impress visiting executives with families, plush carpets, the latest gaming systems, and a well-stocked snack bar. But Emma had no interest in any of it today. She sat in a quiet corner, her tablet balanced on her knees, frantically researching translation errors. "What you doing?" A voice interrupted her concentration. Emma looked up to see Zach Wilson, Thomas's 12-year-old son, peering over her shoulder. With his father's shrewd eyes but none of his reserve, Zack had been Emma's occasional playmate during company events. "Research," Emma replied vaguely, angling her tablet away. Zack dropped into the beanbag chair beside her. "Dad says your dad's making the biggest deal ever today. Billions and billions." Emma nodded, still distracted. "Hey, Zack, has your dad ever mentioned anything weird about Lingo Bridge?" "The translator thing. Nah, he just says it's gonna make everyone super rich." He grinned. "He promised me a new gaming setup after today." Emma frowned, returning to her tablet. There wasn't much online about translation manipulation, mostly academic papers she couldn't fully understand. But one article caught her attention. "Subtle shifts in financial translation, ethical concerns in automated systems." "I'm bored," Zack announced. "Want to go explore? The security guy at the elevator owes me." He'd let us go up to the observation deck. Emma was about to refuse when an idea struck her. "Actually, yes, but not the observation deck. I need to get back to the conference room floor." Zack's eyes widened. "That's totally off limits today. Security everywhere." "I know a back way," Emma said, already packing up her tablet. "Through the service corridor by the cafeteria. I just need to check something." Zack hesitated. "We'll get in huge trouble." "Not if we don't get caught," Emma countered. "Don't you want to see something more exciting than this boring lounge?" That convinced him. Zack had never been able to resist the promise of mischief. They slipped out of the lounge when Lily stepped away to take a phone call, making their way to the service elevator that the cafeteria staff used. "What are we actually doing?" Zack whispered as they rode up to the executive floor. Emma bit her lip. "I think something's wrong with Lingo Bridge. I heard it mistranslating things." Zack rolled his eyes. "So, computers make mistakes." "Not Lingo Bridge. Dad says it's perfect, and the mistakes I heard were weird, like they changed important parts about the contracts and money." The elevator stopped, and they peeked out cautiously. The service corridor was empty, running behind the main conference rooms. Emma led the way, remembering the layout from previous explorations. They reached a utility closet that Emma knew shared a wall with the smaller meeting room adjacent to the main conference area. "In here," she whispered. Inside, among mops and cleaning supplies, was a ventilation grate at floor level. Emma knelt beside it, pressing her ear close. Through it she could hear muffled voices. "Absolutely certain this won't be detected." That was her Uncle Thomas's voice. "The alterations are subtle enough that only someone with advanced knowledge of both languages would notice." Dr. Chen's distinctive voice replied, sounding tense, "But I still don't like this, Thomas. If Robert finds out..." "Robert won't find out unless you tell him, and you won't, because your name is on every developmental document. You'd go down with us." Emma's eyes widened. She motioned for Zack to listen, but he seemed more interested in examining the janitor's supplies. "The contract terms are being modified exactly as we discussed." "No," Thomas continued. "Yes," Dr. Chen responded, his voice barely audible. "The clauses regarding oversight are being softened in translation, and the financial reporting requirements are being presented as annual rather than quarterly. The Russian contingent's concerns about security protocols are being minimized." "Perfect. And the routing codes for the initial transfers. As instructed, 10% will be diverted through the shell companies, undetectable unless someone compares the original documents word for word with multiple independent translators." Emma felt her heart pounding. She didn't understand everything they were saying, but she knew enough. They were using Lingo Bridge to trick the international investors, changing the words to hide something about money. Suddenly, Zack knocked over a bottle of cleaning solution, the crash impossibly loud in the small space. "What was that?" Thomas's voice sharpened. Emma grabbed Zack's arm, pulling him toward the door. They burst out of the closet and ran down the service corridor just as the meeting room door opened behind them. "Hey, stop!" Dr. Chen's voice called out. They ducked around a corner, finding themselves in the main hallway, directly in front of Agent Natalie Parker, the FBI liaison assigned to oversee international financial transactions of this magnitude. The tall woman looked down at them with surprise. "What are you two doing on this floor?" Emma made a split-second decision. "Agent Parker, I need to tell you something about Lingo Bridge. I think it's changing what people are saying on purpose." Agent Parker's professional expression didn't change, but she knelt to Emma's level. "That's a very serious claim, Emma. What makes you think that?" Before Emma could answer, Thomas Wilson appeared, his face composed but eyes sharp with suspicion. "There you are! Your parents are looking everywhere for you two. The lounge is downstairs, remember?" He placed a firm hand on Emma's shoulder. "I apologize, Agent Parker. My son and his friend have active imaginations." "Good day, Uncle Thomas. I heard you talking to Dr. Chen," Emma blurted out, "about changing contract terms and diverting money." Thomas's grip tightened painfully on her shoulder. "Kids, always misunderstanding adult conversations." He laughed, but it didn't reach his eyes. Emma's been reading too many spy novels. Agent Parker looked between them, her expression carefully neutral. "I'm sure Mr. Wilson can take you back downstairs, Emma, but if you want to tell me more about your concerns, later you can ask your parents to call me." Thomas was already steering them toward the elevator. "That won't be necessary, just a misunderstanding." As the elevator doors closed, Thomas knelt down, his face inches from Emma's. "Listen carefully, Emma. I don't know what you think you heard, but today is the most important day in your father's career. If you disrupt this deal with wild stories, you'll destroy everything he's worked for. Do you understand?" Emma looked into the eyes of the man she'd called uncle her entire life and saw something she'd never noticed before. A coldness that frightened her. "I understand," she whispered. But what she understood was that she needed proof. Real proof that adults couldn't dismiss as a child's imagination. And she needed to get it before her father signed anything. Emma sat silently in the executive lounge where Thomas had deposited her and Zach, warning them to stay put or else. Zach was playing a video game, seemingly unconcerned about what they'd overheard. "Aren't you worried?" Emma finally asked him. "Your dad is doing something bad." Zach shrugged without looking up from his game. "Grown-ups always talk about boring money stuff. You probably didn't even understand what they were saying." "I understood enough," Emma insisted. "They're tricking people and stealing money. That's wrong." "Whatever, my dad's smart. If he's doing something, he probably has a good reason." Zach paused his game and looked at her seriously. "And you better not tell anyone else. My dad gets really mad when people mess with his business stuff." The casual threat in his voice made Emma realize she couldn't count on Zach's help. She needed someone else, an adult who would listen. Her mother was the obvious choice, but Sarah would be in the middle of the meetings. And after Thomas's warning, Emma knew she needed solid proof before approaching anyone. She pulled out her tablet again, opening her language app. An idea was forming, but she needed equipment she didn't have. Then she remembered her grandfather's gift. For her 9th birthday 2 months ago, her grandfather had given her a special present, a high-quality digital voice recorder disguised as a unicorn keychain. "For when you want to practice your languages," he'd said with a wink. Emma always kept it in her backpack. She rummaged through her bag and found the small device. It could record for hours and had remarkable clarity. She'd tested it by recording bird songs in the park. If she could get it into the main conference room somehow, she could capture Lingo Bridge's translations and compare them to what was actually being said. But how to get it there? Security was tight, and after being caught once, she'd be watched carefully. Emma glanced at her watch. It was nearly noon, lunchtime. The delegation would be taking a break soon. That might be her chance. Sure enough, 20 minutes later, Lily appeared. "Emma, your mother asked me to bring you to lunch with her. The delegates are taking a break, and she thought you might like to join her in the executive dining room." "Perfect." Emma grabbed her backpack, making sure the recorder was easily accessible. "Is my dad going to be there?" "No, he's having a private lunch with the lead investors, but your mother and some of the technical team will be there." And as they walked to the dining room, Emma's mind raced. She needed to activate the recorder and get it into the conference room before the afternoon session. But how? The executive dining room was elegant but intimate, with her mother seated at a small table with Dr. Chen and 2 members of his technical team. Emma noticed immediately how uncomfortable Dr. Chen looked, barely meeting her eyes as she approached. "Emma, there you are," Sarah smiled. "I thought you might be hungry. Come sit down." As Emma took her seat, she studied Dr. Chen. The brilliant engineer had always been kind to her, explaining technical concepts in ways she could understand. Had he been forced into this deception somehow? Thomas's words about his name being on every document suggested he might not be a willing participant. "Dr. Chen," Emma said innocently, "how is Lingo Bridge working today? Any bugs?" He flinched slightly. "No bugs. Running perfectly." "Emma has always been fascinated by your work, Marcus," Sarah said proudly. "She's quite the linguist herself." "Yes, I know." Dr. Chen managed a small smile. "You've got a natural gift, Emma. Better than any AI, if you ask me." Emma tilted her head. "But Dad says Lingo Bridge is perfect, better than human translators." "Doctor." Chen's smile tightened. "Technology has limitations that humans don't. Nuance, cultural context. A truly gifted human will always have an edge." "Is that why?" Emma began, but was interrupted as servers arrived with their lunch. Throughout the meal, Emma observed Dr. Chen carefully. He was nervous, checking his phone frequently, barely touching his food. Something was weighing on him heavily. When lunch was nearly over, Emma excused herself to use the restroom, taking her backpack with her. Instead of turning toward the restrooms, however, she slipped down the hallway toward the main conference room. With everyone at lunch, it might be unattended. She peeked through the glass door. The room was empty except for a security guard stationed by the entrance. The 3 Lingo Bridge devices still sat on the conference table. Emma stepped back, thinking quickly. She couldn't get past the guard, but maybe she didn't need to. The ventilation system ran throughout the building. If she could find another access point, one that connected to the conference room. She remembered the building layout from her many explorations. There was a small audio-visual control room adjacent to the conference room where technicians monitored the presentation systems. It would have ventilation access and might even be unmanned during lunch. Emma made her way there, finding the door unlocked. Inside, monitors showed different angles of the empty conference room. A ventilation grate was positioned on the wall at child height. Perfect. Working quickly, she removed the grate, activated her recorder, and placed it just inside the vent, positioning it carefully so it wouldn't be visible but would still capture sound clearly. She replaced the grate and stepped back, heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. "What are you doing in here?" "What?" Emma whirled around to find Lily standing in the doorway, arms crossed. "I got lost looking for the bathroom," Emma said, trying to sound innocent. Lily's expression softened. "This area is restricted, Emma. Come on, your mother is looking for you." As they walked back, Emma glanced at her watch. The afternoon session would begin in 30 minutes. Her recorder was in place, capturing everything that would be said in that room. Now she just had to wait. The afternoon stretched endlessly as Emma waited in the children's lounge, unable to concentrate on anything. Zach had disappeared, probably bored with her company, which was fine with Emma. Her thoughts were entirely focused on the recorder hidden in the conference room ventilation system. At 3:30, Lily appeared again. "Emma, your father asked if you'd like to join them for the closing ceremony. They're about to sign the final agreements." Emma's heart leapt. "Yes, please." This was better than she'd hoped. She'd be in the room when the contracts were signed. As they rode the elevator to the executive floor, Emma's mind raced. Should she say something now, but without proof? Would anyone believe her? Her father would be furious if she disrupted his big moment based on what adults would see as a child's misunderstanding. No, she needed to retrieve the recorder first. The evidence had to be clear and undeniable. The conference room had transformed since morning. The business atmosphere had given way to a celebratory mood, with champagne being poured and photographers positioning themselves. Emma spotted her father at the center of it all, beaming as he shook hands with Mr. Zhao. Her mother waved her over. "Come stand with me, sweetie. This is history in the making." Emma took her place beside Sarah, scanning the room. Dr. Chen stood near the lingo bridge devices, his face pale and drawn, despite the festive atmosphere. Thomas Wilson was moving confidently among the investors, all charm and smiles. Agent Parker was there too, her professional demeanor unchanged amidst the celebration. She caught Emma's eye and gave a small nod of recognition. Robert Mitchell took center stage, raising his hands for attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, after months of negotiation and due diligence, we stand at the threshold of a historic partnership. The documents before us represent not just a business transaction, but a bridge between nations, cultures, and financial systems." Lingabridge hummed softly as it translated his words into multiple languages. The international delegates nodded appreciatively, some raising their champagne glasses. "Before we sign," Robert continued, "I want to thank the people who made this possible, my incredible team at Global Tech, our partners from around the world, and especially my right hand, Thomas Wilson, whose financial genius structured this deal." Thomas stepped forward, acknowledging the applause with a modest nod that Emma now recognized as completely fake. "And of course," Robert added, "Dr. Marcus Chen, whose brilliant lingo bridge technology has eliminated the language barriers that once made international deals so challenging." "Dr." Chen managed a tight smile, his eyes darting briefly to Thomas. "Now," Robert said, moving to the large table where the contracts were displayed, "let us make history together." Representatives from each delegation approached the table. Emma watched as pens were lifted poised to sign documents she now believed contained hidden traps. She had to do something. Even without the recorder, she couldn't let this happen. "Wait!" The word burst from her before she could stop herself. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to her. Her father's expression froze in a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Emma," he said through clenched teeth, "this isn't the time for—" "The translations are wrong," she blurted out. "Lingo Bridge is changing what people are saying. It's changing the contract terms." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The international delegates looked confused, some removing their earpieces to examine them. Robert laughed nervously. "My daughter has a vivid imagination. Please, let's continue." "I heard them," Emma insisted, pointing at Thomas and Dr. Chen. "They're using Lingo Bridge to change the contracts and divert money to shell companies." The room erupted in confused conversation. Agent Parker stepped forward, her attention now fully focused on Emma. Thomas moved swiftly to Robert's side. "Robert, control your daughter. This childish outburst is jeopardizing everything." Robert looked between his daughter and his business partner, bewilderment giving way to anger. "Emma, that's enough. Apologize to everyone immediately." Sarah placed protective hands on Emma's shoulders. "Robert, maybe we should listen." "Not now, Sarah," he snapped. "Emma, go with Lily. We'll discuss this later." Lily appeared at Emma's side, gently taking her arm, but Emma pulled away. "Check the translation yourselves," she cried desperately. Mr. Zhao, ask something in Mandarin and see if it translates correctly. Mr. Zhao, looking intrigued rather than offended, spoke a sentence in Mandarin. Lingo Bridge's smooth voice provided the translation. Mr. Zhao expresses his confidence in our partnership and looks forward to signing. Emma shook her head vigorously. That's not what he said. He asked why a child would make such serious accusations. The room fell silent again. Mr. Zhao's eyebrows raised in surprise. The girl is correct, he said in careful English. That is indeed what I asked. All eyes turned to Dr. Chen, who had gone deathly pale. Thomas stepped forward quickly. A simple glitch, he insisted. Technology isn't perfect, but one minor error doesn't justify these wild accusations. Agent Parker moved closer to the contracts. Perhaps we should have independent translators review these documents before proceeding. Absolutely not, Thomas said sharply. These terms have been negotiated for months. Delays now could collapse the entire deal. Robert looked lost, his perfect moment shattered. I don't understand what's happening here. Emma broke away from Lily and ran to her father's side. Daddy, I need you to believe me. I heard them talking. Uncle Thomas is using Lingo Bridge to trick everyone. Robert knelt to her level, his expression torn between trust in his daughter and loyalty to his business partner of 20 years. Emma, he said quietly, this is the most important deal of my life. Are you absolutely certain of what you're saying? Emma nodded, tears filling her eyes. I have proof, Daddy. I recorded their meeting. And I recorded the translations in here too. Thomas's face darkened. What recording? Where? Emma pointed to the ventilation grate. My recorder is in there. It's been recording everything in this room all afternoon. Thomas lunged toward the ventilation grate, but Agent Parker was faster, stepping in his way. I think we'll secure that evidence, Mr. Wilson. 2 days later, the Mitchell family sat in their living room as CNN broadcast breaking news about the global tech translation scandal. Emma watched the scrolling headlines with a mixture of pride and discomfort at seeing her family name splashed across national news. Financial authorities have frozen assets connected to Thomas Wilson and several offshore accounts, the anchor reported. Sources close to the investigation say the fraud could have diverted up to $200 million from international investors if the contracts had been executed as prepared. Robert muted the television, rubbing his temples. The past 48 hours had been a whirlwind of FBI interviews, emergency board meetings, and crisis management sessions. He looked a decade older, the betrayal by his longtime friend etched into new lines on his face. They're calling you a hero, Emma, Sarah said gently, stroking her daughter's hair. And they're right. Emma shrugged, uncomfortable with the attention. I just knew something was wrong with the translations. Because you trusted your instincts, Robert said. You knew languages better than you gave yourself credit for, and you weren't afraid to speak up when adults dismissed you. He took her small hand in his. That kind of courage is rare, even in adults. Emma looked down at their clasped hands. Is Dr. Chen going to jail too? Robert exchanged glances with Sarah. That's complicated, sweetheart. Dr. Chen cooperated immediately and has been helping the FBI understand exactly how Lingo Bridge was manipulated. He claims Thomas threatened his family if he didn't help. I believe him, Emma said firmly. He looked scared, not mean like Uncle Thomas. The doorbell rang, interrupting their conversation. Sarah went to answer it, returning moments later with Agent Parker. I'm sorry to intrude on family time, the FBI agent said, but I have some updates that couldn't wait. Robert gestured for her to sit. Please, we're anxious for news. Agent Parker sat across from them, her professional demeanor softening slightly when she looked at Emma. First, I want to personally thank you, Emma. Your recorder provided crucial evidence. Without it, this might have been dismissed as a misunderstanding. Emma nodded solemnly. Can I have my unicorn back when you're done with it? Agent Parker smiled. Absolutely. We've already made copies of the recordings. She turned to Robert. Mr. Mitchell, our investigation has uncovered something unexpected. It appears Thomas Wilson has been manipulating translations in smaller international deals for nearly 2 years. Robert's face paled. 2 years? But Lingo Bridge has only been operational for 3 years, Agent Parker finished for him. Yes. The fraud began almost immediately after full implementation. All this time, Robert whispered, right under my nose. He was careful to start small, with minor contracts where discrepancies wouldn't draw attention. The billion-dollar deal was to be his masterpiece. She paused. We've also discovered that several other executives at Global Tech were involved. Who? Robert demanded. We're still compiling the full list, but I can tell you that your CFO, Michael Reynolds, and your head of international operations, Diana Westfield, have both been taken in for questioning. Robert slumped back in his chair, looking devastated. My entire executive team. Was anyone loyal? Many were, Mr. Mitchell, including Dr. Chen, despite his involvement. His cooperation has been invaluable, and the evidence suggests he was indeed coerced. Sarah leaned forward. What happens to Global Tech now? Robert has spent his life building this company. Agent Parker's expression became more sympathetic. That largely depends on how the board and shareholders respond. The company itself isn't charged with wrongdoing, but its reputation has certainly been damaged. And the international investors? Robert asked. They've expressed continued interest in partnership, but only after significant restructuring and new leadership is in place. The implication hung heavy in the air. Robert might lose control of his own company. Emma, sensing her father's distress, squeezed his hand. Daddy, if Lingo Bridge was changed to do bad things, can't it be fixed to do good things again? Robert looked at his daughter with surprise, then thoughtfulness. You know, that's exactly what we should be focusing on. Not what we've lost, but what we can rebuild. Agent Parker stood to leave. One more thing. The press has been requesting interviews with Emma. As the child whistleblower who prevented an international financial crime, she's become quite the celebrity. Sarah shook her head firmly. Absolutely not. She's 9 years old. This has been traumatic enough. I understand completely, Agent Parker said. But you should know that several language education advocates have reached out as well. They're interested in supporting Emma's gift for languages in more constructive ways than media attention. Emma perked up at this. Like what? Specialized education programs, mentorship opportunities. One prominent linguist called her ability to detect translation errors at her age extraordinary and worthy of development. For the first time in days, Emma felt a flutter of excitement. Could I really do that? Study languages for real? Sarah smiled. We'll certainly look into it, sweetie. After Agent Parker left, the family sat in silence for a moment, absorbing all they had learned. I still can't believe Thomas would do this, Robert finally said. 20 years of friendship, building the company together. People change, Sarah said softly. Or maybe we never really knew him. Emma leaned against her father's shoulder. Are you mad that I ruined the deal, Daddy? Robert wrapped his arm around her. Emma Thompson, you didn't ruin anything. You saved our company from becoming something corrupt. You saved me from being part of a fraud I didn't even know was happening. He kissed the top of her head. I'm prouder of you than I've ever been of anyone in my life. The doorbell rang again. This time, it was a delivery. Flowers from Mr. Zhao with a note written in careful English. To the young linguist who values truth above all. The world needs more like you. Emma held the card, a smile spreading across her face. In the midst of scandal and uncertainty, something new was taking root. A future shaped not by deception, but by the clear, honest voice of a child who refused to be silenced. 1 week after the scandal broke, Emma sat in the back of her father's car, watching raindrops race down the window as they drove to Global Tech headquarters. The company was in crisis mode, with stock prices plummeting and investors demanding answers. "Do I really have to be there, Dad?" Emma asked, twisting the strap of her backpack nervously. Robert adjusted his tie in the rearview mirror. "The board specifically requested you, Pumpkin. They need to hear exactly what happened, in your own words." "But they won't yell at me, will they?" Emma's voice was small. "Absolutely not," Sarah assured her from the passenger seat. "They're grateful to you. If not for you, the company could have been implicated in international fraud." Emma wasn't convinced. In the week since the failed deal, her world had turned upside down. Reporters camped outside their house. Her school principal had suggested she take some time off until the media frenzy died down, and she'd overheard her father on the phone, his voice breaking as he fought to retain control of his company. The Global Tech building looked different today, less impressive somehow. Security guards escorted them through a side entrance to avoid the press. In the elevator, Robert knelt to Emma's level. "You just tell the truth, exactly as you remember it. That's all anyone wants from you." Emma nodded, squaring her small shoulders. "I will." The boardroom fell silent as they entered. 12 somber faces turned toward them, expressions ranging from sympathy to barely concealed hostility. At the head of the table sat Eleanor Richards, the formidable chairwoman of the board, her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Mitchell. Mrs. Mitchell." Her gaze settled on Emma. "And especially you, young lady. Please, sit down." Agent Parker was already there, nodding encouragingly at Emma. A court stenographer sat in the corner, fingers poised over her machine. "Before we begin," Eleanor continued, "I want to clarify that this is not a formal deposition. We're simply trying to understand exactly what happened so we can move forward appropriately." My daughter is 9 years old," Robert said firmly. "I expect everyone to remember that." Eleanor nodded. "Of course. Emma, can you tell us how you first noticed something was wrong with the translations?" Emma glanced at her parents, who nodded encouragingly. In a small but steady voice, she recounted everything. The mistranslations she'd noticed, overhearing Thomas and Dr. Chen, hiding the recorder, and her desperate intervention before the contracts were signed. As she spoke, she watched the board members' expressions change from skepticism to astonishment. When she finished, the room was silent. "Remarkable," Eleanor finally said. "And you understood enough Mandarin to detect the discrepancies." "I've been studying it," Emma explained. "I'm not fluent, but I know enough to notice when something important changes." A board member leaned forward. "Why didn't you tell your father immediately?" "I tried." Emma's voice rose slightly. "But grown-ups don't always listen to kids. I needed proof." Robert placed a protective hand on her shoulder. "My daughter showed more wisdom and courage than many adults would have in the same situation." Eleanor nodded slowly. "Indeed." She turned to Agent Parker. "Agent, what's the current status of the investigation?" "Ongoing," Parker replied. "Mr. Wilson is cooperating, hoping for leniency. Dr. Chen has provided extensive technical documentation showing how Lingo Bridge was modified. We've identified 3 additional Global Tech executives involved in the scheme." "And the financial impact?" Agent Parker hesitated. "Substantial. Approximately $40 million has already been diverted through previous smaller contracts using the same method. If the billion-dollar deal had gone through as planned, the total fraud would have exceeded $200 million. A murmur ran through the room. Robert's face was ashen. "Which brings us to the question of leadership," Eleanor said, her gaze shifting to Robert. "Mr. Mitchell, while you yourself appear to be innocent of wrongdoing, this happened under your watch." 3 weeks after the board meeting, Emma sat in an unfamiliar classroom at the Stanford Language Center, nervously tapping her pencil. Around her, 12 other children ages 8 to 12 watched as Professor Lin wrote Mandarin characters on the whiteboard. "Emma, would you translate this sentence?" Professor Lin asked. Emma studied the characters, then spoke carefully. "The bridge between cultures is built on understanding, not just words." "Excellent." Professor Lin smiled. "Your pronunciation is remarkably good for someone your age." Emma ducked her head, still uncomfortable with praise. After the global tech scandal made international news, Stanford University had offered her a scholarship to their gifted language program. 3 times a week, Sarah drove her to these special classes while Robert fought to save the company. When class ended, Emma found her mother waiting outside, talking with Professor Lin. "She has a natural ear for tonal languages," the professor was saying. "Her ability to detect subtle meaning shifts is extraordinary. In my experience, that's an innate talent that can't be taught." Sarah nodded proudly. She's been that way since she could talk. Always listening, catching nuances even adults missed. "Mom, can we go see Dad now?" Emma interrupted. "He promised to show me the new code." "Of course, sweetie. He's waiting for us." The drive to Global Tech was quiet. Emma watched the familiar landscape pass by, thinking about how much had changed in just a month. Her father worked 16-hour days now, rebuilding Lingo Bridge from scratch with a new team. The old version had been completely scrapped after investigators discovered translation manipulations had been embedded deeply in its code. At company headquarters, security procedures had tightened dramatically. They needed special badges just to reach Robert's office, where they found him huddled with Dr. Chen and a team of engineers. "There's my girl." Robert's tired face brightened as Emma entered, just in time to see the first test of Lingo Bridge 2.0. Dr. Chen looked up, nodding politely to Emma and Sarah. The engineer appeared thinner, more drawn, but there was a new determination in his eyes. After extensive cooperation with authorities, he'd been granted immunity and had rejoined Global Tech to help rebuild the technology properly. "We've completely restructured the core translation algorithms," Dr. Chen explained, "with triple redundancy verification and blockchain authentication of all translations." "In simple terms," Robert added, seeing Emma's confusion, "it means no one can secretly change what the system translates ever again. Each translation creates a permanent, unalterable record." "Like my recorder," Emma said thoughtfully. "Exactly like that," Robert smiled. "In fact, we're calling this the Emma Protocol internally." Dr. Chen gestured to a sleek device on the conference table. "Would you like to try it, Emma? You'd be our first real-world tester." Emma approached the device cautiously. The last time she'd been this close to Lingo Bridge, it had been part of a massive fraud scheme. "What should I say? Anything you want in any language you know, Dr. Chen encouraged. Emma took a deep breath and spoke in her best French. "La vérité est plus importante que le profit." Truth is more important than profit. The device hummed softly, then responded in perfect English. "Truth is more important than profit." "It works!" Emma exclaimed. "Thanks to you," Dr. Chen said quietly. "Your courage gave us a chance to rebuild correctly." Robert's phone rang, interrupting the moment. His expression darkened as he listened. "I'll be right there," he said finally, ending the call. "What is it?" Sarah asked, recognizing the tension in her husband's face. "Emergency board meeting," Robert said grimly. "Eleanor wants me there immediately." He knelt to Emma's level. "I have to go, Pumpkin. Mom will take you home. I might be late tonight." When Robert finally came home at midnight, his face told them everything before he spoke a word. The board had voted. Effective immediately, Robert Mitchell was no longer CEO of Global Tech Enterprises. 2 months after Robert's removal as CEO, the Mitchell family sat in their kitchen, surrounded by moving boxes. Their spacious San Francisco home had been sold. part of the financial restructuring forced by Robert's suddenly reduced circumstances. "Do we really have to leave?" Emma asked, watching her father carefully pack his collection of antique language dictionaries. "It's for the best, Pumpkin," Robert replied, his voice steady despite the pain Emma knew he felt. "The new house in Palo Alto is closer to your Stanford program anyway." Sarah entered with more empty boxes, "and it's a fresh start for all of us." Away from the reporters and the constant reminders. Emma nodded, but her heart felt heavy. Despite the scandal, this had been her home, her entire life. Every corner held memories. Birthday parties in the backyard, late-night stargazing from her bedroom window, countless family dinners around the very table they were now dismantling. The doorbell rang, and Sarah went to answer it. She returned with Agent Parker. "I hope I'm not intruding," the FBI agent said, taking in the boxes. "I just wanted to update you personally before you move." Robert gestured for her to sit. "Any news on Thomas?" "He's accepted a plea deal. 10 years, with possibility of parole after 7, in exchange for revealing all his co-conspirators and the full extent of the fraud." She paused. "But that's not why I'm here. We've discovered something concerning about the Lingo Bridge Code." Emma perked up, her attention fully engaged now. "Our technical team found a deeper layer of programming that Dr. Chen wasn't aware of," Agent Parker explained. "It appears the translation manipulation had been planned from the very beginning of development, not added later, as Thomas claimed." Robert frowned. "That's impossible. I was involved in the initial design phases myself." "Which raises questions about who else might have been involved in the early stages," Agent Parker said carefully. "Someone with deep access to the foundational code." A heavy silence fell over the kitchen. The implication was clear. Someone close to the original development team, possibly still within Global Tech, had been part of the scheme from the beginning. "Does Dr. Chen know about this?" Sarah asked. "Not yet. We wanted to speak with you first, given your family's personal stake in the matter." Emma looked between the adults, understanding the unspoken concerns. "You think we might still be in danger?" Agent Parker gave her an appraising look. "You continue to impress me, Emma." "Yes, that's exactly what worries us. If there are other conspirators who haven't been identified, they might see your family as a threat, especially now that you're more vulnerable without Global Tech's security resources." Robert's jaw tightened. "What do you suggest?" "Caution, primarily. Be aware of your surroundings. Report anything suspicious and—" She hesitated. "It might be wise to consider additional security measures for your new home." After Agent Parker left, Emma helped her parents continue packing, but her mind raced with new questions. Who else could have been involved? Someone from the beginning of Lingo Bridge's development, someone her father trusted implicitly. The small cafe in Sausalito was nearly empty, just as James had specified in his cryptic message. Robert sat alone at a corner table, his coffee untouched, watching the door with a mixture of anticipation and dread. Against Agent Parker's explicit advice, he'd come alone. The FBI had wanted to set up a sting operation, but Robert feared that might scare James away, and with him answers about who else might be targeting his family. Sarah and Emma were safely ensconced in a hotel under FBI protection. Even so, Robert couldn't shake the fear that had plagued him since Emma's discovery. If James Harrington, his mentor, friend, and original business partner, had been the architect of the fraud, what else might he be capable of? The bell above the cafe door jingled, and James Harrington entered. At 65, he looked older than Robert remembered, thinner, greyer, but with the same piercing intelligence in his blue eyes. He spotted Robert immediately and approached without ordering. "You came alone. Good." James slid into the chair opposite Robert. "I wasn't sure you would trust me enough." "I don't," Robert replied coldly. "But I need answers. Was Lingo Bridge designed for fraud from the beginning?" James sighed heavily. "Not fraud, Robert. Intelligence gathering." "What?" "Lingo Bridge was never just a translation device. That was its commercial application, yes, but its true purpose was far more valuable to certain interested parties." Robert leaned forward, his voice low and furious. "What are you talking about?" "Think about it, Robert. A device present in high-level international business negotiations, government meetings, diplomatic exchanges, transmitting every word spoken in multiple languages." The implication hit Robert like a physical blow. It was spyware, all along. James nodded. "The most sophisticated intelligence-gathering tool ever created. Worth billions to the right buyers." "Who?" Robert demanded. "Who are you working for?" James glanced around the empty cafe before answering. "It started as a private operation, just Thomas and me, selling specific intelligence to corporate competitors, but then we caught the attention of bigger players. Government agencies from several countries expressed interest. The bidding war was intense." Robert felt sick. "So, the translation errors Emma discovered. A secondary operation. Thomas got greedy, wanted to skim additional profits through contract manipulation. I warned him it risked exposing the entire operation, but he wouldn't listen." James shook his head. "Your daughter's intervention actually saved me considerable trouble. Why tell me this now? Why come out of hiding?" James's expression turned grave. "Because the people we sold to aren't happy about the exposure. Lingo Bridge devices are being removed from sensitive locations worldwide. Billions in intelligence potential gone, and they blame me." "So this is about saving yourself," Robert said with disgust. "It's about saving your family," James countered sharply. "They know Emma was the catalyst. They've been monitoring you since the scandal broke. Why do you think I contacted you right after you discovered my connection? I've still got sources inside their operation." Robert's blood ran cold. "Are you saying my family is in danger?" "I'm saying you need to disappear. Immediately. Tonight. Take Sarah and Emma somewhere off-grid. No electronics, no credit cards, nothing traceable." James Harrington's cabin was more fortress than wilderness retreat. Nestled among towering pines at 7,000 feet elevation, the rugged structure featured reinforced doors, shuttered windows, and a generator system for power. Inside, they found fully stocked cupboards, medical supplies, and even children's books and games. "Your Uncle James thought of everything," Sarah remarked, examining the satellite radio, their only connection to the outside world, and one they'd been instructed to use only in emergencies. "He's not my uncle anymore," Emma said firmly, arranging her few belongings in the small loft bedroom. After 3 days in the cabin, the initial fear had given way to a simmering anger. Real uncles don't put their families in danger. Robert, checking the perimeter for the 3rd time that day, overheard the exchange. Emma's sense of betrayal ran deep. First Thomas, now James. 2 men she'd grown up trusting implicitly. "You're right, Pumpkin," he said, climbing the ladder to her loft. "But sometimes people we thought we knew turn out to be different than we expected." Emma looked up from organizing her books. "Like you thought Mr. Harrington was your friend, but he was really a spy." Robert nodded, sitting beside her on the small bed. "People are complicated. James did a terrible thing, but he's also trying to help us now. Do you think the bad people will find us here?" Emma's voice was small, but her eyes remained determined. "Agent Parker says we're safe for now. No electronic trails, no way to track us." He squeezed her shoulder reassuringly. "And in a few days, once they've arranged everything, we'll go somewhere new, with new names." "I don't want a new name," Emma protested. "I like being Emma Mitchell. It would just be temporary until the FBI catches everyone involved." Emma frowned, clearly unconvinced. How long will that take? I don't know, sweetie, Robert admitted. But what matters is that we're together. That evening, as snowflakes began to fall outside the cabin windows, the satellite radio crackled to life. Robert answered cautiously. "Mitchell secure." "Parker here," came the agent's voice through static. "Witness protection arrangements confirmed for 72 hours from now. Extraction team will meet you at the rendezvous point we discussed. Any developments on the suspects?" "Multiple arrests across 3 countries, but the primary operators remain at large." Her voice lowered. "We've received intelligence suggesting they've narrowed your location to within 50 miles. Maintain full security protocols." After signing off, Robert secured the cabin for the night, double-checking locks and closing heavy shutters over each window. The small family gathered around the fireplace, huddled against both the mountain cold and the growing sense of isolation. 3 more days, Sarah said, forcing optimism into her voice. "Then we can put this behind us." Emma sat cross-legged on the hearth rug, her language journals spread around her. Since arriving at the cabin, she'd thrown herself into studying with unusual intensity, as if languages could provide the stability her life now lacked. "I've been thinking about Lingo Bridge," she said suddenly, "about how it was designed to spy on people." Robert and Sarah exchanged concerned glances. "That's not something you need to worry about, sweetie," Sarah began. "But I do," Emma insisted, "because I noticed something when we were testing Lingo Bridge 2, 0, with Dr. Chen." Robert leaned forward. "What do you mean?" "The new translation system had extra security, right? To prevent manipulation." "Yes, the blockchain authentication," Emma nodded. "But what if that same system could be used to identify any Lingo Bridge device anywhere, like a special signature that only the right program could detect?" The sun rose over Lake Tahoe, painting the water in shades of gold and crimson. Emma stood on the balcony of the lakeside safe house where they'd spent 3 tense days, watching eagles circle above the pristine surface. Behind her, inside the modest cabin, her parents spoke in hushed tones with James and a woman who had introduced herself only as Meredith, NSA. And they, after their narrow escape from the mountain cabin, racing through snow-covered forest on James's snowmobile, while vehicles converged on their former hideout, they'd arrived at this seemingly ordinary vacation rental to find it was actually a government safe house, one even Agent Parker didn't know existed. The real FBI and NSA had been investigating Parker for months, James had explained. Her occasional deviation from protocols had raised red flags, but they'd lacked concrete evidence of her involvement with international intelligence brokers. Until now. The sliding door opened, and Robert joined Emma on the balcony. "Beautiful morning," he said, putting an arm around her shoulders. "Is it over?" Emma asked directly. "Really over this time?" Robert sighed. "Almost. Meredith says they've identified everyone involved in the network. The last pieces are falling into place. What about Agent Parker? They're bringing her in today." James provided the final evidence they needed, recorded conversations between Parker and the organization she was really working for. Emma digested this information. So Mr. Harrington was recording her all along. "Insurance," Robert explained. "James has spent decades collecting leverage on everyone around him. It's how he's survived in this world. Do we still have to get new names and move away?" Robert smiled, the first genuine smile Emma had seen in weeks. "No, pumpkin. Meredith says once they've dismantled the entire network, we can return to our normal lives. Different house, same names." Relief washed over Emma. "Can I go back to Stanford for languages?" "Absolutely. In fact, Professor Lin has been calling daily to check on you." The sliding door opened again, and Sarah joined them, followed by James and Meredith. "It's time," Meredith announced, her official tone softened by a hint of compassion. "Parker is in custody." The operation to round up the remaining members of the network begins in 1 hour. James stepped forward, looking oddly formal. I wanted to say goodbye before I go with Meredith. I'll be in protective custody for the foreseeable future. Robert extended his hand. Despite everything, thank you for saving my family. James accepted the handshake, something like regret in his eyes. I wish I could undo the damage I've caused, Robert, to global tech, to you, personally. What happens to the company now? Sarah asked. The board is meeting tomorrow, Meredith explained. With the full extent of the conspiracy now documented, your position looks considerably different, Mr. Mitchell. My understanding is they intend to reinstate you as CEO. 6 months later, Emma stood beside her father on a small stage at Stanford University,